Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, I'm going to talk about pruning Encore Azaleas. Encore Azaleas are best pruned after the first flowering in the spring. That gives them enough time to put on some new growth, rebud, and bloom later in the season. They don't have to be pruned. If they're newer planted plants like the ones I have in my yard, I have 6 varieties in the ground. They're all new plants. They're not really stretched out and they don't really need to be pruned, except maybe a crazy branch here or there. If they're placed properly and enough sunlight, they tend to stay very full on their own. I'll show you an example of that in just a minute, and they'll require very little pruning. They need 4 to 6 hours of direct sun, and people tend to put them in a little too much shade, like older traditional azaleas, and they do stretch out a little bit, and I'll show you an example of that as well. And those ones that are in a little too much shade are likely going to need to be pruned every year. The ones that are in enough sunlight tend to stay compact enough on their own and will only need to be pruned if you're trying to control the size. Mine are newly planted and they really don't need any pruning at all. This is the only one that even comes close to maybe needing a little bit of a trim on it. You can be super precise and use hand pruners and come back to a leaf node and cut just above it like this, and so it will branch out right at that leaf node if you want to. It's really completely unnecessary. They're very resilient, and you can just take a pair of head shears and come in here and just shape, cut them back to the shape that you want to keep them in. And most of them are going to be slightly wider than tall is going to be their normal growth habit. And I just am not going to stress about this at all. I'm just going to get them back into kind of a compact form that it was when it was first planted in here. So I've come over to a neighbor's house. These are autumn twist Encore Azaleas, and these really don't need any pruning. Again, this is placement. These are in a spot that gets 3 or 4, maybe even 5 hours of direct sun during the day, and it's keeping this really nice compact habit. The only reason you do any pruning on a plant like this would be as if it's reached the size you want it and you're going to try to maintain it there. And then after it blooms each time, each spring, you can take maybe 5 or 6 inches off of it and get it, that way when it flushes back out, it'll be back out to the size that you're trying to maintain it. So I've come to an azalea garden in Raleigh, and they have a giant corner of Encore Azaleas, different varieties. But they're being grown under the canopy of these shade trees right here, and they definitely stretch out quite a bit more. You can see this one right here, just how wide and how thin it is. They've just finished blooming. These are candidates for me to take probably 25% off the ends of all these branches, and that will help encourage some new growth down in the thinner parts of the plant, allow some light into it, and they'll quickly reestablish themselves and be fuller. So my autumn bonfire in this container, I'm just going to give him a light haircut like this. It's stretched out just a little bit on me, but not too much, and I just want to try to keep it as a full little ball in here. It's just finishing flowering. It's got a few more left on it, but it's almost finished. It's been blooming for a long time. It'll regenerate some growth pretty quickly, and by summer it'll be back, about mid to late summer it'll be back in bloom again. Again, let's review this. You don't have to prune them. There's no rule that says you have to prune them. If they're out of control and well established, you can cut 50% off of them. You can really go after them very, very hard to bring them under control. If they're in enough sunlight and they're full and compact, there's really no reason to prune them until they've reached the size that you want to maintain them. And then after they flower each spring, pretty quickly after they flower each spring, we want to get this done within probably a month or so of them finishing flowering to give them enough time to regenerate and produce flower buds for later in the summer. So pretty quickly, we want to, you can take them about 6 inches lower than you want to maintain them. That's a good rule of thumb right there, 4 to 6 inches, let's say that. And then ones that are in too much shade and are stretching out are probably going to require a little attention every year right after they flower, like the ones we saw at that azalea garden. And again, it's really nothing to stress about. Just grab your head shears and go after them. You're not causing them any pain or discomfort. They'll flush right back out, and they'll actually thank you for it because it will give them some additional light inside and create some additional branching, which will give you some additional flowers later in the summer. Thanks for watching.